Oh. Can you say me a favor?
Please feel very comfortable to bring food, eat, drink, at any point you need to. Don't worry about it.
Find mine too.
I don't normally do this, but I'm leaving my phone out just because my wife is in the hospital. So we're pretty fine, thank you for doing that. And my mom might call me and I might have to go to the car. So she said probably not. My mom. So my mom is there with her, but she might call us in the car. So in case she probably not, but just in case. So this morning, what may transpire. It's part of life. She's 85 years old.
Oh,
She's
wow.
even under the age of 1. She's Alzheimer's.
Oh, my Lord.
It's very unfortunate. Part of life. Just as an interesting side point, if any of you have any worries about Alzheimer's, because we see you have in your family, the family history, I've been doing a lot of research past couple of years, and there are a number of different researchers who are beginning to call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. Because of the tremendous connection between what's called metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, high insulin levels, and besides diabetes, stroke, heart disease, and other things that come with it, also Alzheimer's. And I actually just heard last week one diabetes saying maybe even Parkinson's should be called type 4. So apparently there's a lot of relation.
To sugar?
Yeah, sugar. Basically, processed foods, especially with sugar, is the biggest killer in the world today. There's probably the greatest killer in all of human history was not Hitler or Stalin or Mao, but a guy by the name of Ansel Keys in the 1970s allowed the U.S. government to switch from regular foods we ate to the food pyramid. The food pyramid has probably caused more harm to the human race than any single other human act has ever done.
I'm reading the carnivore diet right now. It's a really
But who?
That's a good question. We got something Baker, but I found out about it through Joe Rogan. I don't know if
Joe Rogan.
it's a great book. His hypothesis is that originally humans were only eating meat. They were hunting meat all day, and then they were eating meat, and so we're predisposed to be eating
Yeah, so there seems to be a lot of evidence for that, but there's really
just meat.
Just me?
Just meat.
Okay.
Because they hunted like big animals.
I'm sorry.
There is a lot of discussion about it. I told you I'm doing a lot of research on this kind of stuff. So I've seen kind of the whole spectrum. And the main issue with the carnivore diet right now is that there's very little evidence in the research supporting it. It's mostly just people having an anecdotes. But there's a lot of anecdotes. There's a lot of people. And there's also very clearly that people have different genetic dispositions. Some people can't eat a lot of meat or fat, or they'll get disease pretty quickly. They have a certain genetic disposition, so you have to know who you are.
Right.
Some people, actually can only eat meat.
Like if you're Kafka.
So it actually depends. What they found
It catches up to them.
has anyone here done any one of those like genetic testing kits, 613 or yeah, you did it? Right? What was your? You want to share what your? No. We're not the same. Yeah, what's your? You're mostly Iranian.
Iranian, Mesopotamian, Syrian, Arabic, Levantine.
Okay, so that makes sense, right? It seems very reasonable, right? So what they found is that people, when they can actually tell you even how much Neanderthal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So they found that people that have a higher percentage of Neanderthal than average tend to do better on only diet. Like there's actually seems to be some correlation. Anyway, so you have to do your own research, take everything with a giant grain of salt, and be careful. But it's good. It's good to experiment.
Is this being recorded live? Or-
Yeah, I don't know if it's live like that, Facebook live, but it's being
Is it
recorded.
on?
All right, let's.
Yeah, Facebook Live.
Okay, good. So do your own research, check for yourself. If you want to read this something from me, I'm happy to share with you. Okay, guys. So I want to last couple of weeks we did some, looking at Jewish impact in history, looking at anti-Semitism, things like that. Today I want to take a step back, and now that we have explored how the Jewish people have impacted history and how people have treated us, both good and bad accordingly, I want to take a look at some fundamentals of Jewish thinking. Right? What are the most fundamental ideas in Jewish philosophy? So my rabbi, Rabbi Noach Weinberg, of blessed memory, the Rosh Hashiva at Torah, rest in peace. So he said that you could really break it down to what he calls the ABCs of Judaism. 5 ABCDE, 5 fundamental basic ideas. Now, when we say ABCs, we mean not just basic, but foundational. If you don't know arithmetic, 1 plus 1 is 2, you can't do any math. If you don't know letters, you can't read. Right? So too in Judaism, there are these fundamental ideas that the rest of Judaism stands on. Okay? So if I were to ask you, some of you guys know quite a bit, you've had experiences, you've read books, you've been to classes. Oh, I see you guys. You know, move the camera, I'm going to stand up when people came.
You're fine.
Shabbat Shalom. It's the Jewish East side. Middle East. Okay, am I on?
Yeah.
It's good. It's got a good side.
Yeah, very good.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you. So I would ask you, what are the most fundamental foundational ideas in Judaism? When everything rests on these ideas, what pops into your head? What do you think is foundational?
Monotheism.
Monotheism. I mean, there's one God, right? So yeah, that's really, really important. And that is going to be involved in it. What else?
Integrity?
Like being truthful?
Yeah, like honesty.
Not one of the top 5, maybe, depending on how you count number 4. We'll come back to it. Yeah?
I say, world has been created, not like the Big Bang kind of thing.
Terrible show. It was funny the first season, and then it went
Better
way
than
down.
joke.
Right. So that's probably related just to the idea of monotheism.
Yeah.
Right? There's one God, right? So they're the same box. That maybe again, maybe a subcategory 4 and 5, but not really like a fundamental.
Faith?
Faith. Well, depends what you mean by the word. Maybe. We'll see.
Prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. The
Prophecy.
of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Right? Very good. That's gonna be an E. So we got B, a little bit of D, some E, and nobody got A yet.
Love your neighbor,
Love your neighbor.
like yourself.
Not important. Cool.
Definitely a good one, right? So these are great. Every idea that you said so far, fantastic. And yet, we actually haven't even gotten to the first fundamental principle. Now, I'll give you help. It's not only the most fundamental principle of Judaism, but it's actually the most fundamental principle of being an intelligent thinker.
Oh,
The single most fundamental principle of being an intelligent thinker.
asking questions. What's the word for it? When you don't take everything at
Asking
face value, you can ask.
Asking
without
why.
name.
Nosy. Boy.
It's not what you
When
mean.
you argument, not arguing, but constructive.
I think I know what you're going to say. I'll
can't
say it,
remember.
you'll tell me if
Yeah.
that was a critical thinking.
Yes. Thank you.
So, you're correct. That is the most fundamental principle of all of Judaism and all intelligent thought is to be a critical thinker. But what does that mean? What does it mean to really be a critical thinker? So step 1 of being a critical thinker is that you first have to recognize that you might be wrong. You cannot find the truth if you think you already have it. As my karate teacher said, quoting a Japanese proverb, before you can fill your cup, you must first empty it. Kind of funny he spoke that way since he's a Hungarian Jew, but it's karate, so you got to speak that way. That's how you know, by the way, that's how you know who's the best martial artist. What's the way to know who the best martial artist is? Is who sounds the most constipated. But I got someone like Chuck Norris. Oh, well, that's a good martial artist. But Bruce Lee. Oh! Step one, you could be wrong. How do you know you're right? In fact, I'll tell you better. 99, I'm going to make a claim that I think is true. You guys see if it makes sense to you. Most things that most people say are mostly wrong. Does that make sense to you? When you look at all of human history, right, most of the things that most people have said, remember back in the day when they used to put leeches on you to suck blood when you were a little sick, it's called bleeding, or when you go to a barber shop, right, why do they have a white pole with red stripes around it? Because they used to sit there and use this razor to cut you, because they felt like, oh, you have too much blood, that's why you're sick, and that was the thing. They used to take women who gave birth and take earth and stuff it up the woman where she gave birth from to keep the evil spirits out of her. Like, yeah, crazy things people have thought over the years. Or how about, communism? Right? Like my father said to me when I was a kid, communism was a great idea. Only problem is they actually tried it. Right? Killed more people than, almost anything else in human history. Mind-boggling, right?
And still doing it.
And it's still going strong. It's still going strong in North Korea, China, and other places. Right? And maybe soon coming to U.S.
No.
EU. Right? But
Already said it.
anyway, all of us have to take a step back and have intellectual humility. We have to recognize that we might not have the whole truth. And this is true about everyone. If somebody says to me, I know I'm right, I say, okay, is there any chance you're wrong? Is there any possibility of making a mistake? You misunderstood something? And if they say, no, I'm 100% certain, that person you run away from. They're a fanatic. They're not a thinker. And I don't care if it's a rabbi who speaks that way. Right? We teach, as the rabbis say, the real rabbis say, they say, teach your mouth to say, I don't know. I don't know. That's a rabbinic idea. Teach your mouth to say, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it could be. When I hear people say, it seems to me that this is what it is. I think, it's reasonable. That those are statements of someone who's intellectually humble. Or at least pretending to be. You gotta be careful. Right? But at least, they're not, this is what it is. This is what it is. No. Dude, you're a human being. Are you a perfect, infallible, infinite being that never makes mistakes? No, that's only God. As King Solomon said, Shlomo HaMelech says, there is no human so perfect that he's never made a mistake. None. At all. So have a little humility. Maybe I'm wrong. Now, what remind me again? So as Diana pointed out perfectly, when you have that attitude, what is the natural response of a person who says, I don't know everything? The natural response is, well, now I'm going to ask questions. And so what we see is that questioning is the most powerful Jewish value. Right? It comes from intellectual humility. If you're intellectually humble, now you will question. Question. Ask. Never stop questioning. And it's something that we teach in the yeshiva world. We teach our children from a young age to ask questions. I heard a wonderful story. One of my rabbis said that when he was a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, going to what they call cheder. Cheder is like the little boy's yeshiva. He comes out of cheder and he says to his dad, I asked my first difficult question in Torah today. And in Hebrew, or yeshivish in Hebrew, a difficult question is called a kasha. Right, from the Hebrew word kashet, which means hard, not to be confused with kasha, which is a Russian food, right? Or man kasha. It's a kasha. It's a difficult question. And what did his father do? His father threw a kasha party, not food, right? But all his friends gave out what's called pekalach, little bags of treats and prizes. Bought cigars, like he had a kid. Bought cigars and handed them out to his friends. My son asked his first kasha. Now, what did that kid do after all that attention? The next day he went back to yeshiva. He looked for more questions. What an unbelievable education. Question. I've heard many rabbis say, a good question is much better than a good answer. Because a good answer, no, it's nice, but a good question, I think. Yes?
Question.
So sweet.
I've been to the yeshiva system,
Right.
and I've seen where the Kira schools I've been to, like Achiezer and Merkaz, they urge you to
Right.
question.
Right.
However, the Misaki schools I've been to,
Yeah.
they don't welcome it at all.
Right.
And I'm curious why. Because I remember we used to ask questions, and if we did, we were like, they were like, you can't ask that. It's not.
To fully answer that question, I'd have to go through the historical process of Jews going off the path and the response of the Orthodox world to put up walls and shields to protect the Jews inside from not going off the path.
At the end of the day, I think it's a serious mistake, right? And I understand why they do it. I see the history of how it came to that process, but I do not believe that that's authentic Jewish practice.
Right.
And so, don't put your kids in that school.
Right, yeah.
Right? That's what that's how I look at it. All right. Yes.
Are there any areas that are strictly not questionable?
No. If you're, I'll tell. There is one for those who didn't hear because in the video. Are there any areas that are like beyond question? And the answer is no. However, I do want to distinguish between questions that are questions and questions that are answers. Right? If somebody is not really asking because they want to know, they're asking a question as a form of attacking you or challenging you.
Right.
That's not a real question. I've had this happen. I've had students that rage, not recently, but a few years ago, where somebody came and asked me a question, and I could tell immediately by their tone of voice, by their attitude, by their facial expression, and by the way they asked, it wasn't a question, it was an attack. So I didn't answer the question. Just because there's no point in engaging with somebody who's not interested in answers, they're only interested in fighting you. But if a person is honestly coming with a question, there are no questions beyond, none. Now, don't get me wrong, if my 10-year-old girl comes up to me and says, Daddy, how are babies made? I'm going to go talk to your mother. And I'm going to come back to you in a few years. Or I'll answer in a way that's appropriate to her level, right? But that's based on the maturity of the person. Right? But at the end of the day, there's no questions that are, by definition, off limits. Some of our greatest rabbis wrote about their doubts and issues and questions. We're truth seekers. We're open and ready to face and engage with any question. Now, if you don't know the answer, you say, I don't know the answer. You know how amazing it is when somebody asks you a question and you're like a great educator, rabbi, teacher, and you say, you know, I never heard that question before, I don't know the answer. Let me go research it and I'll come back to you. That's so real, it's authentic, it's so honest.
But what if it's a question that nobody can answer at all?
Okay. You know, for most of human history, most questions were questions you couldn't answer. What's the sun? It's Apollo riding in his chariot with fires to light the... Like, nobody knew the answers. So whether it's in the physical world or whether it's in Judaism, it's infinite, right? So we can't know everything. That's okay. As the rabbis say famously, I don't know how to say Yiddish, but it's a Yiddish expression, nobody ever died of a kasha. Nobody ever died of a good question. As long as you're an honest truth seeker, you'll deal with the questions that come. And sometimes you just say, I don't know. Now, if the person doesn't know anything, they can't answer any of your questions. Maybe you need to find a better rabbi, right? But if 90% of the questions you ask, they give good answers, and 10% they're just like, I don't know, then okay, like that's a good ratio, right? You could work with that. Could you go to a good doctor who answers 90% of your questions beautifully? 10% he says, oh, I don't know, that's beyond my level of understanding. You go, you're a pretty good doctor. Same thing, but he's a pretty good rabbi. Like, you really know a good answer. But if it's the other way around, he's got 10%, doesn't know 90%, now you start to wonder, like, maybe you are bad at your job, or maybe there's just no answers. Maybe Judaism doesn't know what it's talking about. But when you go to the real educated people, that's not what it is. I've never, in my entire life of asking rabbis questions, had someone who was in that zone. None. Ever. It's not the reality. Okay. So be humble. Ask questions, challenge, think for yourself, come to your own conclusions as best you can, be a critical thinker. That's the first, most fundamental step to being any sort of a thinker, and all of Judaism. The rabbis teach us, and I'll end with this point, is that Abraham, or the first Jew, or maybe it was before the Torah was given, so maybe we can't call him a Jew, but he was like a proto-Jew, the beginner, the founder of our family, and eventually the Jewish people. The way that he became the person he was by asking questions. All these Talmudic stories about him. Is the sun the creator? Is the moon the creator? Is it the river the tree? And eventually he came to find God. And eventually he came to understand Judaism to his level before Torah was given. It was based on his question. So we should... So don't ask questions. So if Abraham was around today, you'd throw him out of yeshiva? You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. It's insane. All right. So the beauty of Judaism is once you know that questioning is such an important value, what's the most important question you could ever ask in your life?
Is there God?
Good. Now, when I'm teaching in this group, that's a pretty comfortable question to ask, right? Gorski's relatively traditional, not afraid of discussing God. So I don't mind saying it to you, but when I'm talking to, my people, Ashkenazim, right, and secular people, American Jews, I don't phrase it that way. I give them the same question, but I phrase it in a very different way. And I think it's valuable to know. I say the most important question is does my life have a purpose? Right, does my life have a purpose? Now, I believe that those are actually the same question. Is there a God, and does my life have a purpose, are actually the same question. Can you see that?
Yep.
Does that make sense to you? Please question me if it doesn't make sense to you. I believe they're actually the same point. Because if there's no God, there's no purpose. So by asking if you have a purpose, you're actually asking in a backwards way, is there a God who created you with a purpose? Yes?
Richard Dawkins, when he discusses that with people, he said, I'm sorry, but you people have no purpose. And he's the leading atheist.
That's
so
right.
Here you go.
That's right. There's no purpose, there's no real morality, it's just customs of the people. Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, very good. So, what is the purpose of life according to Judaism?
To transcend yourself.
It sounds so new agey spiritual. I like that.
No, I actually heard a rabbi say that.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
I like it, but I think that there's a more fundamental answer. It's not a bad answer. It's a good answer, but I think there's a more fundamental answer. Anyone else who hasn't heard it from me?
To honor God.
Ooh, that's nice. Even more fundamental than that.
To make the world a better place than it is now.
True, but there's a more foundational answer.
To fix your tikkun, or whatever it's called. Like to fix yourself.
Fix yourself and fix the world. Both very true. Let's keep digging. Let's keep digging. What's beneath that? What's underneath that?
Finding purpose that for God, that your purpose that God intended to, like connect purpose and God really.
Yeah, but what is it?
So finding the purpose
No.
that God wants.
He knows
you to
already.
do.
He's telling you, this is your purpose. What is it?
Find what it is.
No. I'm going to tell you right now. This is your, you don't have to find it. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to put it on a silver platter and hand it to you.
Go do
Here
it.
it is. What?
Go do it.
Wait, well, I haven't told you what it is yet. Yeah.
Fulfill it.
Fulfill what?
Your purpose.
But what is it?
You told me.
I didn't tell you yet.
Oh.
I'm still in the process. I said I will tell you. I haven't done it yet. Yeah. Nah, that's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah, right? Only for men, by the way. Women don't have a mitzvah to people multiply. They do have a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah from biology instead of from God. But there's an actual purpose that God gave us. I'm going to quote the rabbis. I'm not making it up.
No, to develop yourself to a point that you can actually obtain the purpose.
No.
No?
To accept it.
I mean, it's a good idea. Accept what?
To accept the proposal of the purpose.
No, what's the purpose? You guys are all like, to do the thing. Our purpose is to do the purpose. That's what you all just said. What's the purpose?
To ask what's the purpose?
Okay.
He heard his purpose.
I want to reach these kids.
No, okay. So I'll tell you, there's a few different ways the rabbis answer it. I'm going to share with you my favorite way. I think it's the most straightforward and clear. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato. He's called by his acronym Ramchal. He's an Italian and then later Dutch rabbi in the early 1700s. And he writes it the following way in he wrote many books. One of his famous books called Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just. Right in the very beginning of chapter 1, first paragraph, he says, the purpose of creation is, like it's right there, he's just laying it out for you. He says the purpose of creation is lehit'aneg al Hashem, to get pleasure from God. V'lehanot neziv shchinato, and to get joy from the radiance of His presence. I don't know what those words mean exactly, they're kind of Kabbalistic. But the point is clear. We're here for the maximum pleasure of existence, of connecting to God. We were created for pleasure, not just a little bit of pleasure. The most maximal, infinite pleasure of connecting to the infinite source of all pleasure. And everything else you said, which were good answers, is stepping stones to that. To transcend yourself, become a greater person, fix yourself, fix the world, be fruitful and multiply. All of these are part and parcel of the process of connecting to the infinite being and becoming this vessel to receive the ultimate pleasure that God wants to give us.
But isn't that in the Olam Haba? These words I heard is the ultimate thing when you get to the next.
So he explains that the ultimate place of experiencing this pleasure is Olam Haba. But it's equally your purpose here. And if you read Mesilat Yesharim, it's quite complex. He brings different angles on what that means, even Olam Haba. It's not so clear. But to keep it simple, you earn the ultimate pleasure now. And you'll experience it most fully in Olam Haba. Okay, yes?
Isn't that an interpretation of, what does it say in the actual text? I mean, in the Torah, that is the case?
Well, when we look in Torah, and we see what does God say our purpose is, the only place we see where God says, I'm giving you a choice, is in the last book of the Torah, Sefer Devarim, 5th book, where he says, I place before you today a choice. And then he gives us, he says, good and life, death and evil. Okay? But what does that mean? What is good? What is life? What is death? What is evil? What's the choice? So the oral tradition, right, the rabbis explaining what it means, is it also means life means eternal life. Hashem is chai v'kayam. He's alive and enduring. We want to connect to that infinite life. Now, other rabbis will say the answer in different ways, but I believe, based on my research, that the different answers are really coming down to the same point. That the Rabbi Lutzato says it the most clearly and directly. And that the other rabbis are giving different angles and aspects, but he's the one who lays it out the most clear.
It sounds a little hipsterish. Like, I mean, hippie-ish is probably.
I mean, Jews were the first hippies.
Right.
3,800
You know where I'm
years
coming
ago.
from, right? Like, it seems like enjoyment.
Everyone else was like, sacrificing their children to the fire gods, and the Jews are coming along and like just schmoozing with the Lord and playing guitar. We were the first hippies. They're like, hey man, love your neighbors yourself, man. Like, we're the ones who invented that. Pass the Jewish blunt.
Yeah.
You have to use a scissors.
The show's water.
It's a little short. All right.
Sorry. I digress.
Okay. So our purpose in life, as a whole, our purpose is to have the ultimate connection to God possible. That's the ultimate pleasure of existence. And everything in Judaism is leading to that point. If you don't understand why a mitzvah or a custom or something the rabbi said, or something the Torah said, if you don't understand how it's getting you closer to God, okay, now you have things to question. How is this getting you closer to God? And my Rosh Yeshiva, I used to say all the time, you're sitting and learning a Talmud, you're sitting and learning a Chumash, you're sitting and learning something in Torah, that you should stop every once in a while, sit back and go, how is this getting me closer to God? Like, ask. And if you don't know, find someone who's more knowledgeable. Right? And if they don't know, someone will know. Or it's one of those that nobody knows. And that's okay. As long as things are known, it doesn't have to be everything. Alright. I'm in the middle of reading a book now for the first time. I've been looking forward to reading it for a long time. I just never had a chance. My mom bought it for me for my birthday. It's a book called Choreb, which is Rabbi Shishner Hirsch from the 1800s, one of the greatest rabbis in the past couple hundred years, where he explains all the mitzvot one by one, and what is their purpose, and what is the symbolism, and what are they trying to do for you. And it's a masterpiece, and I've just started it, and it's phenomenal. Right, so if you guys are interested, you want to learn the book with me, and we'll go through all the mitzvahs, all 613, just in categories, and what are they supposed to do for you, how do they get you closer to God, we can do it. Why not? Alright, so the sea of Judaism. Once you know that life is about getting this pleasure from God, connecting to Him, transcending yourself to connect to the infinite, right? Ultimately. What is the number one thing that is holding us back and stopping us from getting this ultimate pleasure? Another way of asking the question is, what is the number one source of our misery and suffering?
Our physical self.
The physical self is not a source of suffering. It's all, because you say that, it's also your source of joy.
True.
It's just the place you live. It's like saying the source of my suffering is my mother's house. It's where you live.
The reason I gave that answer is that I heard that we were initially spiritual beings, and then we entered physical, apparatuses,
Sure.
and they prevent us from actualizing.
Yeah, so there's limitation about being in a body. But you need that limitation, because without that limitation, there's no growth. There's nothing to overcome. There's no free will. Right? So it's a necessity. The rabbi said at the end of the 6 days of creation, when God says, and it was very good, Hinei tov me'od, it was very good. Now one of the rabbis commented, what was very good? Zu yetzer hara. The evil urge. What? What? Why? How could? What do you mean? The rabbis are saying that why? Because the Yetzer Hara is the only way we can actually fulfill our purpose of coming close to God. Because you have to have something to overcome. You ever read a novel or watch a show or a movie where there was no struggle, there was no conflict? No, you never did, because they're boring. Because nothing happens. Because why would you ever want to read or watch something where there's no conflict? We know there's a deep part of us that knows that to achieve anything in life requires something to strive against, something to overcome. So God creates the Yetzer Hara, and that's the thing we strive against, and therefore it's the most, in one sense, it's the most important thing God created for us. Alright. So what's the number one thing that's holding us back, the number one source, not the only source of human misery, but it's the number one thing holding us back from achieving our purpose? So what's that word that we use when you do something that's against the Torah or against God? Averah. What does that mean?
It's
Sin. Repent, sinners!
Transgression.
Right, transgression. It's a more fancy word, right? Now, Averah is a specific kind of sin, right? What's the word that is the umbrella for all sins? Chet. Very good. Have you guys ever heard the word chet? Guys say chet. Come on, everyone say chet. Guys, make sure you can. I'm always surprised that Russians can't pronounce chet. I mean, you have chet, but why can't you say chet? It's the same letter, right? Anyway, so chet is usually translated when you read through the prayer books and the Torah, when they're translated in English, Russian, Swahili, whatever. They usually translate chet as sin. The problem is that it's really a very bad translation. The word sin doesn't actually exist in Hebrew. Right? The word averah is a transgression. The word pesha is a willful, rebellion. Right? The word chet, which is the category word of everything, actually means to make a mistake.
It sounds like hate.
Yeah, it's a letter chet with a tet, so it's chet with a
From the word to miss, like you have a target.
Exactly, that's exactly right. When in the book of Kings, it talks about the king had these units of slingers, the guys that would swing a sling, not like a slingshot, but a real military sling, and throw a rock. It says that they were so good they could shoot like 100 feet, velo yachata, and not miss. They wouldn't miss. So to miss, which in terms of behavior, when you miss the mark, that's called making a mistake, right? So chet doesn't mean sin, you're a bad person. It means that you thought this would bring you close to God, or you didn't pay attention. And what you did actually did not bring you close to God, or maybe even took you away. It's called a chet. Made a mistake. Right? I thought that yelling at my wife and calling her family terrible would bring me closer to her. But then I discovered that that was not actually the case. I made a chet. I made a mistake. Right? Chet is the number one source of human misery, and it is the thing that holds us back from our purpose. Now, there's other things that make us miserable. There's disease. We've got a Chinese virus on its way. Make sure you guys buy a little bit of supplies before the first person gets sick in New York and all the stores get empty of food and medicine. So if you have some things, just don't go crazy. Don't make a bunker. But just buy a few things just in case. Good to do it now. Do it tomorrow. Right?
I think New York is already affected.
Queens. One case in Queens.
Okay. One case no one's going to care about. The moment a few people, if somebody dies, you're going to see the stores are going to empty. It's going to be crazy. Listen, Hashem with that case, it's potentially very bad. Hopefully it's not going to be as bad as it
Just wash your hands.
But why do you think Hashem's making this happen, though? He's upset at his people.
I'm not a prophet.
But why is this happening, though? Like, that's the question I always ask.
I don't
Like,
Will Chinese
I
come
don't know.
are we sinning as a...
We're always sinning.
We're always on.
So maybe. See, maybe as a whole, God is like, Jews, wake up, Shuvah, come back. I mean, ultimately, that's why everything bad happens to us, because Jews are making mistakes. Right? The earthquakes and the tsunamis and the diseases and the wars and the destruction are not happening because some dumb redneck in Alabama is doing something. Who cares? There's no effect in the spiritual world. But when Jews, religious Jews specifically, who know better and they still don't take care of the orphan and the widow, and they still cheat in business, and they still treat people with disrespect, that's why all terrible things happen.
What about the Jews that are not religious?
They don't know better. They don't know better. The rabbis call them tinok shenishba, a baby that was abducted and raised in the wrong way. Nothing happens bad in the world because a Jew doesn't know any better. Question? That'll come to you.
Religious or knowledgeable then?
Someone who knows better. Right? If you know better, whatever your religious level, I don't know what the word religious really means in actuality. If you know Torah to some extent, you know what you're doing is wrong. You know, you're sitting there going, I shouldn't eat this bacon. Like, you know, right? Okay? And you do it anyway. So, okay, you know, we're all...
On Friday night. At a diner.
Listen, I used to eat bacon on Yom Kippur, right?
Are you serious?
Of course. But not because I was rebelling against God. I literally didn't know. My girlfriend, when I was in high school, I had a girlfriend, and I saw her eating what I thought were crackers. I found out were matzah. I'm like, why are you eating crackers? She laughed at me. She goes, these are matzah. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. You never met someone more ignorant than I was. And she said, it's Pesach, it's Passover, we eat matzah. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And meanwhile, I'll have my sandwich with my bacon, lettuce, and tomato, BLT. And I'm like, oh yeah, Passover. And did I go, oh, so I'm like, oh, let me try some of your matzah, right? So like, I take it, I'm like,
Tasteless.
I go back to bacon, lettuce, tomato, and rye. Anyway, rye, because I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
A little bit of kosher.
A little bit, a little bit of dill pickle on the side. Yeah, a little bit. Anyway. Okay. Back to hate. If you look in... Anyone here ever read a relationship manual? Like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, anything like that?
A little bit, and I just stopped halfway through.
Start with it. So you know there's actually a Jewish version of it? Men are from Borough Park, women are from Williamsburg? Yeah, which is funny that they'd be like, oh, let's make up our own version of it. So it's actually it's a pretty good idea. The idea like when you have a relationship with somebody, especially a member of the opposite sex, because we're like different species sometimes in how we look at the world. So you need someone to teach you how to do it. Right? When I teach a regular age class, I like to point out the following example. See, a guy comes home, he sees his girl, his wife, his girlfriend, whatever. She looks upset. So he says to her, is everything okay? And she goes,
Everything's fine.
yeah, everything's fine. And he goes, all right, no one's like and those who know are like, oh, you fool, right?
Ignorant.
Which, the words that came out of her mouth were, yeah, everything's fine. But what she meant was, I want you to keep asking me to prove to me you actually care.
That means you gotta go repent.
No joke, by the way. No joke, yeah? So now, I said this to a room full of 150 first level rate students. And a few guys know this, right? But most don't. And all the women in the room are like, obviously, right? And some of the guys are like, yeah, I learned that the hard way. And then most of the guys are like, what?
That happens?
That's it? And you see some guys go, that explains all my relationships. Just like completely ignorant of the reality, so they made a mistake. They made a mistake. They thought they were being such a good guy. Everything okay? Now, she goes, so I learned because my rabbis taught me. So when I got married, and I came home, and I see my wife, and she looks upset. And I say, yeah, is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, everything's fine. And I know better, because I learned from my rabbis. So I'm like, baby. Turn on my cell phone, unlock the door, shut the window. I'm here for you, baby. She's like, no, everything's fine. No, baby. I see by your face, something's bothering you. Please, baby, I need to know. I want to help you. And then she's like, okay, fine, I'll tell you. And I'm like, inside, I'm like, yes, like I have decoded, I understand, But guys who don't know, they're like, why is you? They go like, everything okay, baby? Yeah, everything's fine. And then turn around to do something, and she gets up and goes, you hate me, you never listen to me. And the guy's like, what did I do wrong? I don't understand. I think he's okay, he's okay. Are you a liar? I don't understand. So you're trying to do something that brings you close, but you don't know. Make a mistake. And by the way, there's another kind of mistake. Let's say you know, but you don't want to deal with it right now. So you know, you come home and you're tired. You worked hard the whole day. You had to make the money, bring home the kosher bacon, right? You come home and you see your wife, she looks upset, and inside your head you're going, oh no.
Why not? Why tonight?
Oh, I just want to sit on the Xbox and play some Madden or whatever. So you say to her, hey baby, everything okay? And she goes, yeah, everything's fine. And in your head, now you have this free will struggle. There's a part of you, your Yitzhak Tov, your good herb is like, Okay, you gotta buckle down, you gotta sit there, you gotta, and the Yetzer Hara goes, Madden, video game, don't deal with this right now. And then your free will choice goes, alright, I'll see you later. I'll be in the basement, okay? You go down and you're like sitting in the game going, she's gonna be so mad later. But you're like, worth it. You know, like, that's okay. That's a mistake. Yeah, you're a touchdown now, but you're not making a home run later. Right? So, you know what I'm talking about? Alright, someone's in the doghouse. Baby, I'm so sorry. Not too late. You know, how was your video game? I hope you enjoyed it. Alright, tell the action your game. Anyway. It was a chait. You made a mistake. With God, it's the same thing. We have a relationship manual with Hashem. It's called Torah. You have things that you should not do, because if you do them, they will distance you from God. Those are called the negative mitzvahs. Don't do this, don't do that. Then you have things you should do, because if you do them, they will bring you close to the relationship with God. They're called the positive mitzvahs. It's the same thing. Okay. The Deen of Judaism asks, what is the one mistake that leads to other mistakes? What is the chet that is the source of more chet?
Idol worship.
No, actually, it's not the source. It's a severe error. But it's, nope.
Stupidity?
Stupidity is not a sin. It's just the way you're born. You can't fix stupid. There's nothing you do about that. Ignorance. Close. You're right there. I'm going to add just a word or two. Ignorance is exactly correct except for one little thing. If it's ignorance, that's your fault. Because if you didn't have an opportunity to fix your ignorance, then who can blame you for that? But if you could have asked questions, but you didn't because you were lazy or because of your ego, oh, I'm not going to ask, I know everything. Or, you had the ability to learn, but you decided to other things instead. So willful ignorance. When you chose to remain ignorant, that's called by the rabbis the greatest chet. As it says in the Talmud, Bittul Torah Keneged Kulam. The nullification of Torah. What does Torah mean in Hebrew? Teachings, instructions. Therefore, let's translate it as the willful ignorance of the instructions is the greatest of all sins. Because if you don't learn, how are you ever going to avoid future errors? And so the E of Judaism, the flip side of that is, what's the greatest of all mitzvot? The greatest of all good things is Talmud Torah. Learning Torah, or learning the instructions. Figure out the knowledge that will help you to avoid future mistakes. The knowledge that will help you to do correctly the things that will develop the relationship. I have a guy that I was talking to a couple of years ago. He was having marital problems. I said to him, well, maybe you and your wife, certainly you, but maybe both of you, go to a therapist, and you can read some books, or you can learn how to do things. He's like, the books are not going to teach me anything. The therapist is not going to teach me anything. Right? I'm like, so you're not having marital problems? It's like, no, I am. So do you think it's just going to magically fix itself? What are you doing? You got to learn how to do it. You got to find out the information. Go to the experts. Find out the people that have done it well. Forget the books. Find people that you see have wonderful marriages. And then ask them, how'd you do that? Right? What did you do to have such a wonderful relationship? And they'll probably tell you books to read. That's the books you read. The books the people who know what they're doing have read. Okay. So it's a quick review, and then we're done. But the most fundamental principle of Judaism is that you have to be questioning, because you're intellectually humble. You could be wrong. Question. Be a critical thinker. Ask. Find out. What's the most important question to ask? What's the purpose of life? Is there a God? Same question in two different forms. What is the purpose of life? What does God who created us want from us? He just wants to give us. He wants to give us the ultimate pleasure of connection to Him. What's the thing that's stopping us the most and the greatest source of human misery? Human error. Either your own error or someone else. Look at your lives. I can guarantee you 99% of the time, except for very rare people, that if you look at all the misery and trouble you had in your life, it was either your fault or some other person's fault. Yeah, sometimes a disease just takes you out. Sometimes a natural disaster. Sometimes, a rock from space, an asteroid hits you. Right? But that's very rare. Mostly it's either your or some other human being who messed up is the source of our misery and trouble. Right? What's the worst mistake? Because it's the source of all the other mistakes, is to be willfully ignorant and not learn the instructions, which we call Torah. And therefore, the greatest mitzvah, the E of Judaism, is learn the Torah. That's why why are we obsessed with learning Torah? And we are. We're obsessed with it. Go to yeshiva, learn Torah, sit down, learn. Men, women, doesn't matter. Learn some maybe slightly different Torah depending on your yeshiva, but just learn. It's not because, it's like God up in heaven is like, oh, I'm going to write a bestseller. Write a Torah, and then he goes, now you got to read it. It's like, you got a choice, read my book.
Not Scientology. Sorry.
A million separations. Right? It's like, the book is the instructions. If you come to work, first day on the job, and God comes to you and says, everything you ever need to know about how to do your job well, get promoted, and make a lot of money is right here in this book. And you're like, great, thanks a lot. Garbage. I'll figure things out on my own. Then everyone will look at you and go, there's a technical term in the Torah. It's called shmuck. This is crazy. You're gotta be insane. What's wrong with you? I gave you the instruction manual. You're willfully ignoring it. So Judaism says the instruction manual for life is Torah. You want to get the most out of life? You want to be the best spouse, best child, best worker, best everything? You want to transcend yourself? You want human perfection? You want world perfection? It's only going to come from understanding, learning, and maximizing your involvement in Torah. Whatever your level of religious observance, that's between you and Hashem. But if you're ignorant of Torah, you've got nothing. You cannot represent the Jewish people until you know what the Jewish people represent. You have to learn. The greatest thing you could possibly do from now and the rest of your life is find set times to regularly learn Torah. On your own, but even better with partners, go to classes, whatever. Whatever else you do in Judaism. As the Talmud quotes God, it says, even if they abandon me, as long as they learn my Torah, the light of the Torah will bring them back. Question?
I know that for women, they technically don't have to learn, right?
No, that's not true. Women have a mitzvah to learn Torah as well.
Okay, so
it's
then
just a different Torah that men have to learn.
So, I know some modern Orthodox schools now implemented that girls can learn Gemara.
Right.
My question is there anywhere in Orthodoxy that you're not technically supposed to? Is that why the established schools
There's no forbiddenness. It's not forbidden for women to learn Talmud at all. In fact, the rabbis say that if it's really a woman's nature, she loves to learn Talmud, let her learn. Right? But it became, again, for historical reasons. If you look through, especially European history, you'll see that it just became, I think, women just don't learn Talmud. Now, probably a lot of women are just not interested in Talmud. It's not what they enjoy. It's not the thinking process is not what they're into. And so the rabbis are like, look, women don't learn Talmud. Let the men learn Talmud. When you learn the halakha, Jewish law, what do you have to do? Right? But nowadays, one of the things I remember reading years ago, one of the rabbis said that how will you know Mashiach is coming when you see that men and women are becoming equal again? Right? So we see it happening in our day and age. You don't like that one?
No. I'm just thinking about the transgender nonsense.
No, not that kind of quality. No. I didn't say that one person was both man and woman. That's not what I said. Yeah.
What about Kabbalah?
Oh, Kabbalah, almost no one should learn. That's not a man or woman issue. That's an ignoramus issue. It's like, I'm going to learn high-level astrophysics and the deepest level of quantum mechanics. Do you know geometry? No. Maybe you should learn this yet. You're just going to be looking at stuff and have no idea what it is. Maybe it'll hurt your ability to function in the world. That's Kabbalah. We're walking around like, have you learned Chumash? Have you learned Halakha? Have you learned Gemara? No. So you're going to learn the deepest secrets of Torah? Honestly, think about it rationally for 1 second. Doesn't make any sense. Now, you want to learn some of the Kabbalah for Idiots books? That's fine. Right? I learned that kind of stuff. It's like someone who knows the stuff, who condenses it and puts it in language. They do that with science too. I know about Einstein's theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. I couldn't tell you the mathematics behind it, but the general principles I know from books that are made for the layman, right? So too, you can have Kabbalah books for the layman. That's okay. But to sit there and learn the Kabbalah stuff, I have no idea. You're gonna wind up going crazy and putting on red strings and doing weird things. anybody does wear red strings. Okay. Any last questions? Yeah, dude, just be pure with Hashem. Don't start coming up with calculations. Guys, any last questions, comments, issues? Yes.
I was reading R.A. Kaplan's book, Jewish Meditation, and he said that Abraham connected himself with God through deep meditation.
Right.
Is that true?
I think so, yeah. And he even has books on Jewish meditation.
Who?
Rabbi Kaplan.
Right. That's what I was referencing.
Yeah, Rabbi Kaplan he has several books on meditation. He has meditation in the Torah. He has Jewish meditation, and then he has even a third one. I read all his books, like years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
I have no idea what happened to them. It was like way beyond me, but they were cool to read.
I heard. Oh, never mind.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see